Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner and operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to our podcast today. So, if you have been following what we've been doing this month, which is our themed months that focuses on franchises, you'll realize that what we've been doing is kind of doing an individual episode for each one of the films in a particular franchise so that you, the audience, gets a better and clearer idea of what we think of each individual film. We're doing that because some of the films in the franchise are not nearly as well known or have been seen or liked as the original film in the franchise, and therefore focusing on those individual films in their own episode is crucial to being able to understand and appreciate the film if that is what you need to do. Now, that being said, the franchise we have been discussing today has been the franchise that has recently did a legacy sequel, as we like to call them nowadays, and that would be the Final Destination franchise. But this episode is going to focus on 2002's Final Destination 3. And to discuss this movie with me today, I am bringing back Mr. Philip Ray, who we discussed these films earlier as well. Thank you, Philip, for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, me and Phil have been discussing some of these Final Destination films. We went through the new one, the legacy one, Bloodlines, earlier in the year. And then, of course, we did, as you will hopefully read later on or listen to later on, our podcast on the first and second one. And now we're down to the third one. So, I have to know, how did you come about seeing the third film? And what were your initial impressions of the third film?
So I have a very interesting way I discovered this movie. It was through Blockbusters, and it was the DVD edition, which I'm not sure if you're aware about it, Kevin, but for our listeners, basically what Final Destination 3 did was they did a special DVD edition called the Thrill Ride edition, where you got to choose their fate. It was an interactive film. So what would happen is there were certain key moments of the movie that it would allow the audience to decide one decision or another, and it actually showed alternate clips of the movie. So that actually was my original introduction to Final Destination 3, which was very interesting, and I've not seen another movie do that of the interactive kind of film. Like we've seen it nowadays with Black Mirror or something like that, but back then at the time, doing something like this kind of interactive with alternate scenes was not really seen at the time.
No. It was something new and they were experimenting with, but unfortunately it didn't last very long. I don't know how successful this was on video, but I do know it was a successful sequel in the franchise. Not the most successful, because that would have to wait till the next film. But the audience kept growing with each one of these films, and they brought back with this film the first film's writer and director, or one of the writers and director, which was Glenn Morgan and James Wong, I believe. So I did see this at the theater when it originally came out. Like I've seen actually every one of the Final Destination movies in the theater, but this one was one of the ones I didn't care for. So I actually only ever seen this one twice. I saw it when it originally came out at the theater, and then again when we were right before we were prepping for the show. So I had forgotten everything about this third movie before actually watching it. So this one is the one with the roller coaster accidents. The roller coaster accident. As many I always found this one entertaining only because I love roller coasters, so I love that concept. I'm not a huge fan of the movie overall, and I still am not. It hasn't really grown on me as well as but I do have to say that with each one of these Final Destination films, they do create a unique opening disaster.
It definitely is. I'm definitely someone that when I was younger, I was afraid of roller coasters. I was too chicken to ride rock and roller coaster at Disney World when I was young, and this movie definitely continued to lay the impression of me being afraid of roller coasters for the longest time. Because again, talking about, we said this before in our conversation with Final Destination, they do a good job of taking especially with the big openers of like, what is the one thing that people are afraid of? Roller coasters,
Yep.
going on a plane, driving behind a truck with a bunch of wood logs. Yep, we're going to make sure that fear continues to instill on the audience who watches it, because they definitely do that here. And it definitely, at least for me, left a very much a hard impression for roller coasters for the longest time.
Now, I will say this: by the time we get to this third film in the franchise, the story format has been established. It essentially jumps up. With the first film we watched, the original Final Destination, there was the initial disaster, but there was a little lead up to that disaster before it actually happened, because it was the first movie. You had to get to know some of the characters before they get on the plane, and the plane happens, and it goes from there. This film, it kind of we just need to show the disaster as soon as possible. So we're going to open the movie with them at the carnival, and then they're going to have a disaster. Now, and then everything else is going to fall apart from there. With this film, I liked, and I've realized as we're watching each of these films for the show, that they each come with a different way in which the person who sees the accident before it happens gets everything relayed back to them. So with this one, our main character, Wendy, who's played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, is the one who has the pictures. So she's taking the pictures for the yearbook at the very beginning of the film, and those pictures are what leads her to clues to figure out how each person in the film is going to die. I thought that was very clever. And thankfully that the film started off with, we have to find out the order of which they died. That's how they're going to get died again. Unlike the second movie, who we learned kind of reversed everything. And thankfully they never did that again.
Yeah, this one thing about the movie with that, it continues kind of the trend the last movie had, but they doubled down on it, sadly. The premonition, like, again, the main character has the premonition of the original death, but then after that, they then get the visions all the time about how everyone else is going to die, which gets very, which started in Final Destination 2 and continues on here even more kind of obnoxiously, because they do a lot of like because that was back in the early 2000s of like the quick jump cuts and like, flashing light, trying to just orient you. That did not work for me, at least, with that.
Okay. This only being the second time I ever watched the movie. It was one of those things where I was hoping that the cast of characters would be a lot more interesting, but they just kind of, and this is what is one of the pitfalls of the franchise in general, is that past the first one, and actually, let's say past the first one and before the last one, because the last one I think was brilliantly handled. All the people are just cannon fodder to be killed. They don't have like any real purpose or anything. They just try to save each other one by one. Thankfully, the main character here, Wendy, knows most of the people. I did like the fact that her boyfriend ends up being one of the people who are actually killed, as she's more or less trying to figure everything out with her boyfriend's friend. I did like that aspect. Instead of her and the boyfriend being like the two main characters that you follow, they switched it up a little bit. So, and then they make comments of it that, they wouldn't have been friends if it hadn't been for her boyfriend to begin with. So I did like that aspect of the film. They changed that.
Yeah. It just does, like you said, unfortunately, like the other Final Destinations before and after, they continued the trend of kind of making your lead two likable, and then the rest of the cast is either are one-off characters, one-note characters that either A, you don't care about if they die, or you want them to die. Like the character of I believe is a character of Frankie. Yeah, Frankie character who is like
Cheeks. Yeah, you don't care what happens to him.
He's a sexual predator. You want him to die. Like you want him to die. And that is, again, the good thing about the Bloodlines movie is they try to make all the characters likable, versus in this, you don't really care when half of them die because either you don't care about them, or again, you've got you got the two Ashleys who are, again, you don't like, you kind of want them to die because they're not really interesting characters.
No, but because that's the name of the two that die in the sun tanning one, right? Like
Correct.
I couldn't remember their names to save my life.
Yeah, it's the Ashleys. Which again, I will another probably the tanning bed is the second most famous. It is the second most famous kill in this movie. That also did a number on me of like, I never was ever planning to go to the tanning bed, but I remember watching as a kid and seeing that scene, and then after being like, why would anyone even want to go to the tanning bed? I'm like, you could die like this. But that was one more iconic deaths in it. Which, talking about that in general, I'm curious of your thoughts, but other than, again, the roller coaster and maybe the tanning bed, a lot of these deaths are not really that memorable. They're kind of just lame.
I think that, like the Saw franchise, they tried so hard to come up with creative new ways to kill people, and it doesn't always work as well. Like when Frankie Cheeks dies, you actually don't think it's him until it's revealed to be him. Like there's no lead up to like Wendy and what's his face? Is it Kevin? Yeah, I think it's Kevin. Are at the drive-through trying to get food for Wendy, and Cheeks just happens to be in front of them when the whole Ruberg sequence comes along. But you thinking it's going to happen to Wendy and Kevin, and unfortunately, it ends up happening to Cheeks. And then you think that you think it's just a random person that gets killed until it's revealed to be him, and it's like, okay, wow, and then you move on. Move on.
And again, that was the douchebag character anyway. That was the sexual predator character anyway. So you're just like, oh, okay, cool. And then you got later scene with Lewis's death with the weight, which is just that is kind of like the equivalent of Foundation Nation 2 with the woman with the airbag, of like her death, and like Lewis's death is pretty just comedic.
Yeah, but you also have to keep in mind that each one of these films has that character in it who thinks they can defy death and they can control their own fate, and that's essentially what he is. He's just like the one character in the second one, and of course, there's actually the character in all three of these movies. The one character who thinks he can defy fate, and he can control his own destiny and stuff like that. But I like the shock of it, but I really did think like that was like location wise, they were just trying to make everything feel like it was dangerous in that location. Like it wasn't,
yes, because you had the freaking swords, actual swords in a gym that apparently like, and it was very much like I don't think that's actual a thing. I'm like, it's very much like that probably was one of the probably biggest stretches kills in the movie of just like, sure. Other than that, and like the flagpole one later.
Yeah, who dies at the flagpole? I'm trying to remember who that was.
That's the Perry. That's the fake out character. It's the main character's sister's friend.
Oh yeah, that's right. Julie is the sister, yeah. And that's the one that you don't realize that there's another victim before Julie until she's like 5 seconds before she dies. Yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, she was, so she's got to be sitting with someone. I had forgotten all that. Like literally, I had forgotten this entire movie. In between the first time I saw it in 2006 and now, so what? It's been almost 20 years since I've seen this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I just think this was one of her earlier films, and it's not nearly as memorable as some of the other stuff she's done.
So, fun fact with that, fun trivia there. Mary Elizabeth Winstead actually auditioned for the second Foundation Nation movie, and obviously they chose not to go with her in that, and so they ended up remembering her for this movie and immediately gave her the role. But she actually auditioned for the last Foundation Nation 2 and was not given the role originally.
Oh wow, they must really liked her audition, but said, you don't fit that role, but you'll fit this one as the lead. That's kind of
Yeah,
cool. And she's
yeah.
gone
So
on to
that's
do a lot of horror films.
oh yeah. So that's a nice little trivia fact. Knowing a little bit about because you probably have not seen the DVD version, right, Kevin?
I have not. I have a Blu-ray copy of this, so I've never owned this movie until I bought like the box set Blu-ray. I don't know what the hell's on it because I haven't watched any of the special features on it.
Yeah. So just for it is very interesting. So basically, the different alternate cuts they did. So there is a moment at the beginning where, again, you get to decide does the characters get on the roller coaster or not. Uh, Obviously, if you choose to let them go, the movie plays out normal. But if you choose not to go on the roller coaster, the characters don't go on, the accident doesn't happen at all, and then the movie ends, which is very funny. The second alternate change they did was with the Ashley's death, which actually is kind of cool. What they did was an alternate. I forgot what the decision is, but basically they still die in the tanning bed, but they actually get out. So they actually get out of the tanning beds. One of them gets out of the tanning bed and ends up getting electrocuted to death by the tanning bed itself instead of burning to death, which was kind of funny. Then you've got the scene, and then Ian's death. Is it Ian's death? Yeah, Ian's death is probably the most lackluster choice. When the cherry picker's falling, you get an option of do you jump out of the way or do you not move, and that's just how he dies. So it's funny because I didn't know because I watched the DVD. I didn't know that the original death is him getting bisected because I'm used to the DVD version where he doesn't move and he just gets squashed completely. You don't even see his body.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then there's another one too with Frankie's death is another one that changes. His is actually the most significant out of all of the changes because there's an option where what happens is you can either lay on the horn or you can get out of the car. Obviously, in the movie, if you choose getting out of the car, the movie goes as normal and Frankie dies. If you honk again, Frankie flips off the characters, Wendy and Kevin, and then they recognize, oh crap, it's Frankie, and they save Frankie. And he doesn't die in the movie. And instead, there's a quick little scene they showed of him getting arrested because of him being a creep. And that's the last you see of that character. Huh. So he's the only character in all of the movie that actually has an alternate scene where he does not die. Which was very interesting that they went that way. And then the Erin character has a similar death. Her death is similar in the alternate, but basically the change you can make is it's actually the pigeon. So the option is, do you shoot the pigeon as Ian? And obviously, if you choose how the original went, if you shoot the pigeons, then then that scene plays out normal. But if you don't shoot the pigeons, it's actually the pigeons. Very similar to Final Destination 2, it's the pigeons that actually end up causing the Erin character to get killed.
Oh,
So that is the nice little fun facts of what they changed in the DVD version from my experience watching it, which was very funny watching again and knowing, oh, this was the canon stuff. Again, for me, the biggest one was how Ian died.
Now, I wonder if all that's on the special features for the Blu-ray. Then
it might be. I would not be surprised if it's there because it was definitely interesting choice. To me, it made my experience a little bit more enjoyable than if I just saw it alone, like from the original cut, which is not as strong.
Which is not as strong. Oh Jesus! So, getting on to this, because the thing is, by the time they're doing this third movie, audiences have been accustomed to the format of these films, and it becomes almost like your standard Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger movie, where it's more interesting to see how each of these people die than it is about the story being told. So, in that respects, do you think that there is a weak death sequence in this film, or if there's one that overshadows all the rest of it?
Weak. I definitely think a couple of them are weak. I think the cherry picker is kind of a weak death.
When Aaron dies,
with Ian dies. Aaron's also actually, I would say Aaron is probably a little more weaker, with that, versus Ian's death. But both of them, I would say, probably is the weakest of the movie.
doesn't Ian get
Crushed by the cherry picker?
Well, no, he gets killed in the blah 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 in the field of the while they're at the carnival at the very end of the movie.
Yeah, which is again very reminiscent of the first one, of like the whole "you're all dead," like from I can't remember the character's name now.
The characters become all synonymous when you're by the time you get to the third movie.
Oh yeah, but it's very So that is very on point. The Billy character's death, when he gets decapitated because he's like, oh, you're all dead, and then he dies. That is basically on point with Ian's death in the third one, when he's yelling at Wendy and Kevin about being like, I can't die, see, I'm fine, and then he gets crushed.
The guy which I never really cared for that whole plot device. When I rewatched the movie, he's destined to supposed to kill Wendy because of Aaron's death, and I'm like, I don't know, that's kind of a weak ideal there. I know they're trying to go on with something different. I just thought it was kind of a weak like story turn, or what did you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. It's very weak.
Or it's forced or something. It doesn't seem to register with how we've seen that character through the rest of the movie, and then him blindly just blaming her for everything. And it just when I rewatched the movie, that just struck me as odd.
One thing I will say, I'm glad that they brought this back in this movie, is the concept of saving the characters, like characters saving each other, because that was like we talked about in our Final Destination 2 episode. That was one thing that was solely lacking in the last movie, was the characters trying to save each other, because it did helped a little bit with the tension of who's gonna die next. Again, like probably the best example of that was Frankie, because again, we didn't even know Frankie was in harm's way in the first place. So I am talking about one positive of the movie. I am glad that they brought that back.
Yeah, well, I think that works really well with the Julie character when they're at the carnival at the very end of the movie trying to find Julie because she's next, and to find out who was sitting with her. But what happens to her when she gets the about to say the noose tied around her neck and dragged around by the fucking horse for a good bit of time there before Wendy can actually save her, I thought was really creative. Although I would have think that her neck would have snapped before all that shit. But it was very interesting and visually cool to watch. That's part of the last part of the movie.
Yeah.
And then that was one of the sequences I really enjoyed. Tanning bed is just because the tanning bed is, that's like you said, one of the most iconic ones in the entire fucking movie is the tanning bed one.
Yep. Another thing about this movie that is, I'm kind of curious on your take on it.
Okay.
Breaks the mold of Tony Todd. Tony Todd is in the movie, but he does not appear as Bloodworth. He is just voiced. He's just the voice of the subway conductor and the devil statue and stuff. Yeah. Do you think they could have included Bloodworth in this movie or not? I think they could have. I think there's a way they could have done it. It's a little sad they didn't do that in this movie, but I also know that they were very much attempting to steer away from, like, they were trying to make this as standalone as possible.
Well, it's not just only that, is by the time you get to the third film in any franchise, they try, and I don't know why they always do this, but they try to distance that third movie from the other films. Because I think there's an assumption that maybe the people going to go see the third film may have not seen the first two all, or they may have seen one but not all of them. And I think that's some of the stuff that happens in later sequels. By the time we get to the fourth or fifth one, the filmmakers assume that you haven't seen the other four. And I think Tony Todd is because he's so defined as a mortician in the first two, it would have been really hard for them to shoehorn that character in this film. So allowing him to be the voice of the devil and the conductor at the end, I think, was a good compromise, because you immediately know it's fucking Tony Todd.
Yeah.
He has such a distinct voice that you can't help but know it's him.
Yep. And oh, do you know? Which is I'm gonna segue to talk about, speaking of the conductor, is the ending. There is an alternate ending for this, that it's not on the DVD, but I'm not sure if you've heard about what the alternate ending was.
No, I have not.
So originally, the idea was, because in one thing they do in the DVD version, they don't do it here in the original theatrical cut, was they were going to discuss about the fate of all Final Destination 2 characters. So, because for people who have not seen Final Destination 2, the way that ends is our two main characters survive. They, again, Clear and Thomas survive at the end.
Not Clear. Clear dies.
Sorry, it's Kimberly.
Yeah.
Kimberly and Thomas, they survive, and so in this movie, well, in the DVD version and the credits, they try to reference the characters having died off screen, kind of what they did with the main character from the first movie. They killed him. They basically did the same in this one originally, but that was not the original idea, which obviously gets retconned by the time we get the Bloodlines.
Yeah.
The original ending, though, was they were going to have them come back for the ending and be on the train as well. So basically the way the scene broke down was Wendy sees the other two characters, sees Kimberly and Thomas, and then they jump cut to the scenes from a couple scenes in Final Destination 2 for the audience to go, oh, okay, that's who those are if they haven't seen it. And then Wendy realizing, like, oh, this is a clear house from death. And basically, and the scene continues on, the train crashes. The implication is that death kills also Kimberly and Thomas from the second movie. But they ended up not doing that because one of the, I think it was Thomas's actor, I could be wrong here, was not able to make it on set, and so they decided to just cut the scene. But yeah, originally the way the scene was going to play out was Kimberly and Thomas were going to make an appearance on the train as well.
That would have been interesting, but thankfully they didn't do that, because when they reused that concept for Final Destination 5, when it goes back to the original film, I think was plenty of that shit.
Yeah, it did help, because again, for people who haven't, they do represent Bloodlines, that those at least the Kimberly character was able to stay alive and it did not get killed off screen or anything. So it definitely was interesting. It definitely would have been, for fans who saw Final Destination 2, it would have been an interesting moment. But they instead they kept it where Final Destination 2 is really the only movie where the main protagonists survive the film and not get killed off.
Well, yeah, I think they went back to this where, you know, you think the characters live, but then they end up getting killed. I think became the norm. So that when you're watching these films from here on, you just want to know how they get killed.
Yeah.
For this one, I like the concept of them ending it with another wreck. I thought I really enjoyed that part of the film. It started off with roller coaster and ended with a train wreck. I actually like that aspect of it.
Yeah. Although there is a little plot hole of like you think they would have kept in touch with each other to make sure they don't all suddenly end in the same area like they did, but yeah.
Well, that's not a plot hole. I don't. I think they think their lives are perfectly fine by that time. They're not going to get. That's not going to come for them. They still live in the same area in theory, but it does seem a little odd for Kevin. I think it's Kevin to show up there. And I would have thought Kevin and Wendy would at least stayed in touch more.
Yeah, because again the scene plays out. They're all three shocked. They're all on the same train.
Yeah,
It very much, and that's the problem to me. It was a little like two of them were sisters. One of them was like a best friend. You would think they would have like still stay in touch and or whatnot. So them being on the same train wouldn't have surprised them. But that's a small nitpick.
yeah, because it makes for. I mean, the actual train wreck is really fucking cool.
Which that's another thing too is they shot in the movie because in the original theatrical cut, it cuts to black, but in the DVD they do show an extended scene where you actually see Wendy outside the train.
Yeah.
And then she gets hit by another like she's like the implication is Julie and Kevin are dead. She got launched out of the train, but like her legs are broken, so she can't move, and she sees another train coming, and it hits her, and you see that.
That did that not originally happen in the theatrical release? I can't remember.
No, it just cuts to black.
Because remember, like I said, I saw this almost 20 years ago, and so I don't remember what the hell it was, how it ended at the theatrical version versus now. I could probably ask my sister that since she's seen the movies a billion times, but me, I've only ever seen this twice now. So
yeah, it cuts to black in the original theatrical cut, and then the alternate cut they actually showed you get the more gorier death for Wendy, where you actually see her get physically hit by a train.
Yeah, I actually like that. I like that ending. More so than the second movie, I like the third one because the first one because when you see the first one for the very first time, that sign smashing in the whatchamacallit, it's just amazing to end the movie like that.
Oh yeah, the way the first movie ends is very iconic with the who's next, and you see the sign swinging back.
Yeah. But I do out of the 5 out of 6 movies that we've discussed up to this point, I do enjoy the ending for this one as much as I did the first one. And don't get me started about the bloodlines. It's just a call to all the other films that was just brilliantly conceived the way that ended. So we'll have to talk about the 4th one and 5th one in later episodes, but I like the way that this ended because I'm not going to get too much into the next movie until that episode.
Yep. Actually, it's funny. This is my last little like fun fact. So again, like I said earlier, Kimberly and Thomas's character were going to get killed off screen. The way they died, I realize now, is basically how death happens in Bloodlines. What happens is you see a little newspaper article, and it says that the characters ran into each other at a store, and basically one of them, Kimberly's coat gets caught, and Thomas tries to save her, and they both end up getting pulled into the wood chipper, and you know what happens with that. Which makes me actually think that they end up taking that idea a little bit later for Bloodlines with the lawnmower kill.
Oh, interesting.
I wonder if they had that idea and decided to use that later.
Well, we'll have to bring that back up because the next film uses a lawnmower for a kill. So
yeah.
So, any other thoughts on Final Destination 3?
Nope. It's again, it is not the strongest. It's gladly not the weakest either. Um, I we'll get to the weakest ones when we get to it, but overall, like the movie's okay. It's definitely you kind of this movie you definitely are seeing a lot. I mean, you saw in the second one, but this kind of continues on the whole. You're not really seeing the series is not getting that much better.
No, because by this time they do the third movie, they've hit on a formula that they just rinse, wash, repeat from here on out. The second one tried to do some different things with the concept. By the time they do this third movie, they're just rinse, wash, and repeat based on what audiences enjoyed, and they just keep doing it. So it's not nearly as interesting as like Bloodline does, but because they don't try and do anything new with the concept. So that being said, we're going to get to rating this movie. And for everyone out there listening to the show, what we do is we like to rate the movies from 1 star to 5 stars based on whether or not we think it's a poor movie, which is 1 star, or we think that it's an excellent movie, which is 5 stars. Where on the spectrum do you place Final Destination 3, Philip?
I would put it as a 2. It's okay, but it's not something that it's I think the best way to watch this is how I watched it, which was the DVD choose your own. I think that for me made it more enjoyable, but if I watched it, I knew if I watched it without that, it was just okay. If it's definitely not that strong of a movie.
So I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. I give it a little bit more because I do like the train sequence at the very end. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead makes the film a little bit better. And Tony Todd too, even though it's just his voice. I'll have other things to say about the subsequent movies, but these movies in the franchise need something to elevate their status, especially considering the nature and the types of movies that they become. Because in a sense, as the franchise drags on, they do become more like a typical slasher film without the actual slasher. Whereas the first one was much more creative with the way they handled the material. So with that, I want to thank you, Philip, for joining me on this conversation in horror where we discuss Final Destination 3. Everyone out there who's listening to the podcast, we hope that you enjoyed this episode as well, and that you will check out the other episodes that we have done on the other films in the Final Destination franchise. Also, make sure to check out all of our previous episodes in which we touch upon other horror films, including Final Destination Bloodlines, which we did earlier in the year. And make sure to check out our sister podcast, Conversations in 4 Color, which delves deep into comic books, graphic novels, and manga. That is our Patreon exclusive podcast, so you have to be a subscriber to have access to that podcast. Other than that, we all wish you a pleasant day, and we can't wait to bring you another episode of Conversations in Horror. From everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment, have a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.